In August of 1932, above the Colorado River, a man sat on a narrow wooden seat tied to a rope and lowered himself down the wall of Black Canyon. 500 feet below him was the river. Above him was desert sky. Around him was rock that had been cracking, freezing, heating, breaking, and falling for millions of years. On his lap was a jackhammer. The drill weighed about 44 pounds, it was heavy enough on the ground. On a rope, with the canyon falling away beneath his boots, it became something else entirely. Air hoses hung beside him. Electrical lines crossed the cliff. Drill steel clanged against stone. Loose rock waited above, below, and beside him. His job was simple to describe. Remove the dangerous rock before the dam could be built. But the only place to do that job was on the face of the canyon itself. So, he hung there. He drilled holes. He loaded dynamite. He swung away before the blast. Then he came back with a crowbar to pry loose what the explosion had not taken. Men like him were called high scalers. They were some of the most visible workers on the Hoover Dam project, and some of the most exposed. Before the concrete could rise, before the Great Dam could block the Colorado River, before turbines could generate power, and Lake Mead could fill behind the wall, someone had to make the canyon safe enough to build in. That meant men on ropes, hanging from the cliffs, stripping loose stone by hand. This is the story of the Hoover Dam high scalers, the men who worked hundreds of feet above the river, before modern safety gear and modern construction systems could do the job for them. Hoover Dam is easy to turn into numbers. 726 feet high, more than 6 million tons of concrete, millions of barrels of cement, tens of millions of pounds of reinforcement steel, for massive diversion tunnels blasted through canyon walls, more than 21,000 men employed over the life of construction. A government contract so large that 6 major construction companies joined together to bid on it. Those numbers are impressive, but they can also hide the first physical problem. Before Hoover Dam could become a concrete wall, Black Canyon had to become a construction site. And Black Canyon was not built for men. The walls were steep, the desert was hot. The river was powerful, the rock was not clean and stable, simply because it looked solid from a distance. Millions of years of weather had worked on it. Water entered cracks, heat expanded rock. Cold contracted it. Freezing split it. Erosion loosened pieces from the wall. The canyon face held boulders, slabs, flakes, and broken stone that could come down without warning. That mattered, because Hoover Dam would not be built in a quiet field, it would be built inside the canyon. Workers, equipment, cables, derricks, trucks, tunnel crews, concrete crews, engineers, surveyors, and inspectors all had to operate below those walls. If loose rock remained above them, the canyon itself became a weapon. A falling stone does not need to be large to kill from that height. A dropped tool could become deadly. A slab loosened by blasting could crush men or equipment below. So before the dam could go up, the walls had to be scaled. That word sounds almost gentle now. Scaling. Like cleaning. Like smoothing a surface. But on Hoover Dam, scaling meant climbing down on ropes and attacking a canyon wall with drills, explosives, and steel bars. The men were not polishing rock. They were making a hostile place less likely to murder the crews below. That was the old method. Put a man on a rope. Give him tools. Lower him into space. Let him judge the rock with his eyes, hands, hammer, drill, and body. If a section sounded hollow, looked cracked, or showed weakness, it had to come off. If it would not come off by hand, it had to be drilled and blasted. If the blast did not clear it, the men returned and pried at it. Again and again, wall by wall, bench by bench. The canyon had to be stripped before the dam could trust it. High scalers were special men, because the job demanded a rare combination. Strength was not enough, plenty of strong men could not work on a rope above an empty canyon. Courage was not enough either. Courage without control gets a man killed fast. The high scaler needed balance, nerve, timing, tool skill, and a strange comfort with exposure. Some were former sailors, some had worked in mines, some had experience with rigging. Some were Native American workers, some were men, whose earlier lives had taught them how to move around height without freezing. Later accounts of the project described former circus acrobats and sailors among the men drawn to the work. That makes sense. A sailor understands ropes, an acrobat understands balance. A miner understands rock and blasting. But Hoover Dam asked them to combine those instincts in a place where the workplace had almost no floor. The high scaler's seat was usually a plank or wooden chair called a bosun's chair. The rope held the man held the tool. The wall held nothing, unless he made it hold. He might carry water, drill steel, powder, lines, or small tools. The heavier equipment could be lowered to him.
Once in position, he had to brace himself against the cliff and drill into the rock. Imagine trying to control a jackhammer while sitting in a swing. Now, put that swing hundreds of feet above a river. Now, at desert heat. Add dust. Add noise. Add the vibration of the drill through the body. Add the knowledge that the stone you are attacking may be the same stone that falls toward you. That was the high scaler's office. The job had a rhythm. First, descend. Then inspect. Then drill. The drill bit into the canyon wall, powered by compressed air through hoses that snaked down the cliff. The men drilled powder holes into the rock. Then the holes were loaded with dynamite. The scaler had to move away, clear the shot, and wait for the blast. The explosion broke the rock, but not always cleanly. Afterward came the second danger. Broken rock could hang in place. Cracked slabs could loosen, but not fall. The scaler returned with bars and hand tools to pry them away. That meant working around rock already wounded by explosives. The canyon did not always fall when told. Sometimes it waited. That waiting was dangerous. On the dam site, falling objects became one of the most serious hazards. Rocks, tools, drill steel, equipment. Anything dropped from above could become lethal below. In that environment, the hard hat became more than a rule. It became a survival tool. At first, men improvised. Some coated cloth hats with coal tar, creating hard, protective shells that became known as hard-boiled hats. The idea sounds crude, but crude does not mean useless. Later accounts describe cases where men were struck so violently by falling rocks that their jaws were broken. Yet their skulls were not fractured because those hardened hats took the blow. That is the kind of detail that tells you how dangerous the site was. A good day was not a day without impact. A good day might be a day where the impact did not kill you. Eventually, 6 companies issued commercially made hard hats to men on the project, and deaths from falling objects were reduced. That is progress in its most direct form. Workers almost died. Workers improvised protection. The company adopted it. The job became slightly less deadly. Not safe, less deadly. That distinction matters. The Hoover Dam was a modern project for its time. It had cableways, compressors, trucks, power lines, concrete plants, diversion tunnels, forms, refrigeration pipes, and a massive organized labor force. So this is not a story about a dam built with no machines. It is a story about one of the most human parts of a machine-age project. Even with all that equipment, the canyon wall still required men on ropes. Machines could move material. Machines could mix concrete. Machines could haul, hoist, drill, pump, and light. But someone still had to hang on the wall and decide what rock could stay. That is why the high scalers matter. They stand at the edge between old labor and modern construction. They used power drills and dynamite, but the essential method was older. Put the worker where the problem is. Let his body bring the tool to the exact spot. Let his judgment decide what happens next. Before modern access platforms, remote-controlled equipment, rockfall netting, engineered harness systems, and today's safety rules, the high scaler's body was the positioning system. He was the platform. He was the sensor. He was the operator. And if something went wrong, he was the first thing exposed. The scale of Hoover Dam made that exposure almost theatrical. Other workers could look up and see the high scalers moving on the cliffs. They were visible in a way tunnel workers were not. They became famous on the project. Their job had status. Some of that status came from pay. High scaling was among the best paid labor positions because it was so dangerous. Some of it came from spectacle. Men on ropes naturally draw attention, and some high scalers leaned into that attention. When foremen were not watching, some would swing out over the canyon and perform stunts for the workers below. Contests developed. Who could swing the farthest? Who could swing the highest? Who could do the most daring trick? That sounds reckless, and it was. But it also reveals something about men who choose dangerous work. If the job forces a man to live with fear every day, pride becomes part of the equipment. Humor becomes part of the equipment. Performance becomes part of the equipment. Not because danger is fake, because danger is real enough that men need a way to stand in front of it. One of the most famous high scalers was Louis Fagan, known as the human pendulum. For several weeks, Fagan helped move a crew around a projecting boulder on the Arizona side. The method was almost unbelievable. A man would wrap his legs around Fagan's waist and grip the rope. Fagan would leap out into open air. The rope would swing them around the obstruction. Then he would return for the next man. This happened twice a day until that part of the job was finished. Think about that as transportation. Not a walkway, not an elevator, not a scaffold. A man becoming the ferry. The cliff blocked the route, so Fagan turned his own body and rope into a commute. It is easy to laugh at the nickname, the human pendulum, but behind it is the practical world of old construction. When the job gives you no clean path, you invent one. Sometimes the invention is elegant. Sometimes it is dangerous. Sometimes it is both. The high scalers also became famous for rescue. During the work, engineer Burl Rutledge slipped from the canyon rim. 25 feet below, high scaler Oliver Cowan heard him fall. Cowan swung out and grabbed Rutledge by the leg. Seconds later, another high scaler, Arnold Parks, swung over and pinned Rutledge against the canyon wall. Together, they held him until a line could be dropped and secured around him. Rutledge was pulled up alive. That story belongs in the center of the film because it shows the strange skill of the high scalers better than any general description. These men did not simply tolerate height. They worked in it. They moved through it. They reacted inside it. When a man fell, Cowan did not run across a floor. There was no floor. He swung. The same movement that could be stunt or commute became rescue. That is high scaling in one image. A man hanging over Black Canyon, holding another man's life by the leg. But not every danger ended in rescue. Hoover Dam killed workers. The official industrial fatality count is 96 men who died at the dam site from causes such as drowning, blasting, falling rock, falls from canyon walls, heavy equipment, truck accidents, and other job site causes. Other counts are higher when they include death from illness or injuries that occurred away from the site. The record is complicated. The danger is not. Men died building Hoover Dam. Some died because the canyon dropped things on them. Some died because blasting and excavation are unforgiving. Some died because the desert and the river made every mistake larger. That is why the high scaler's job cannot be separated from the larger project. The whole dam depended on preparing the site. The site preparation depended on rock removal. Rock removal depended on men willing to go where ordinary crews could not stand. The concrete later got the fame. The wall became the icon. The reservoir became the map feature. The turbines became the promise of electricity. But before any of that, there were men knocking loose stone from a cliff. America needed the dam badly enough to accept enormous risk. The Colorado River was powerful, unpredictable, and destructive. It flooded farms and towns. It carried silt. It cut through desert. It gave water and took it away. For the American Southwest, controlling the Colorado meant flood control, irrigation, municipal water, and hydroelectric power. It meant making desert agriculture and desert cities more reliable. It meant taking one of the most untamed rivers in the country and forcing it into a schedule. That was the national promise. But the promise had a physical sequence. First, build access. Build Boulder City. Build roads. Build rail lines. Bring power to the site. Drill and blast diversion tunnels through the canyon walls. Divert the river. Excavate to bedrock. Prepare the abutments. Pour the dam in interlocking blocks. Cool the concrete. Grout the gaps. Install the power plant systems. Every step depended on the step before. The high scalers belonged early in that chain. They made the canyon walls safer for the men, cableways, tunnel portals, intake structures, and dam abutments that came after. Their work was not decorative cleanup. It was foundational safety. If loose rock remained above a portal, men entering the tunnel could die. If unstable stone remained where the dam met the canyon, the structure could not be trusted. If blasting left broken rock hanging, the next crew inherited the danger. So the high scaler followed the problem. Where the rock looked suspicious, he went. Where machines could not easily reach, he went. Where the wall dropped away, he went. That is the part that makes the job so cleanly BBM. The physical enemy was height and rock. The old method was rope, drill, dynamite, crowbar, and nerve. The strange machine was not only the jackhammer or the cableway. The strange machine was the whole arrangement. Rope above, man in the middle, tool in hand, canyon below. The human cost was fear, injury, death, and a need to invent safety as the job revealed its dangers. The legacy is one of the most famous dams in the world, still visited by millions, still holding back the Colorado, still standing between canyon walls that men once had to clean by hand. The workday of a high scaler began with descent. He did not walk to his station. He entered it from above. A rope might be anchored at the rim. He would sit in his chair or harness, carrying tools and supplies, then lower himself down to the level of the work. The view could be magnificent. That does not mean it was comforting. The Colorado River cut far below. The canyon walls rose around him. The work site was alive with noise. Compressors, drills, blasting, trucks, cableways, men shouting, rock falling. The desert sun turned metal hot. Dust filled the air. Water bags were necessary because the heat could wear men down quickly. The dam was being built in a place where climate itself joined the labor problem. This is another part of old construction that finished monuments hide. A visitor sees concrete. The worker felt heat. A visitor sees symmetry. The worker heard blasting. A visitor sees a canyon view. The worker watched for falling rock. The same place can be beautiful and brutal. For the high scalers, beauty did not reduce danger. It framed it. When a scaler drilled into the wall, the drill did not behave like a quiet modern tool. The vibration traveled through his hands, arms, shoulders, and back. He had to control the bit against hard rock while suspended. He had to manage hoses and lines that could snag or pull. He had to avoid hitting other equipment. He had to trust the men above and beside him. If a line frayed, if a knot failed, if a falling object struck him, if a blast went wrong, if loose rock came away unexpectedly, there was little margin. The canyon gave no second floor. It gave air. That is why the job demanded men who could think while afraid, not men who felt no fear. That is a myth. Useful workers are not fearless. They are functional under fear. The high scaler had to know when to push, when to stop, when to call for a line, when to swing away, when to clear the shot, and when a piece of rock was too dangerous to trust. That judgment was not written into the tool. It lived in the man, and it lived in the crew. No high scaler was truly alone, even when he hung by himself. Men above handled ropes. Other scalers worked nearby. Powder men loaded charges. Foremen gave orders. Inspectors checked progress. Crews below depended on the result. The whole operation was a vertical chain of trust. If one man got careless, another might pay. If one rock came loose, the man it killed might be hundreds of feet below, never knowing who dislodged it. That kind of responsibility changes work. It makes every tool part of a larger risk. A dropped wrench is not a small mistake when gravity has 500 feet to improve it. That is why falling objects mattered so much on the project. The hard-boiled hats were not a side detail. They were a worker-made answer to a repeated danger. Modern safety culture often arrives as rules, standards, inspections, and equipment catalogs. On Hoover Dam, part of it arrived first as improvisation. A man coats his hat with coal tar because something from above might kill him. Other men see that it works. The practice spreads. Commercial helmets follow. The danger remains, but the odds shift. That is one of the most important hidden stories of old labor. Workers did not only build the structure. They discovered the safety lessons that later workers inherited. Sometimes they discovered them by surviving. Sometimes by watching another man not survive. Hoover Dam's construction was famous for speed. The contract allowed 7 years, but the major concrete work was completed ahead of schedule. Speed was part of the project culture. The term highballing was used by workers to describe pushing the job hard, forcing the pace. Speed saved money. Speed impressed officials. Speed built reputations. But speed also pressed against safety. When a project is huge, remote, expensive, and politically important, time becomes pressure. Not air pressure like the Brooklyn caissons. Schedule pressure, money pressure, public pressure. Every crew feels it differently. For a high scaler, schedule pressure could mean more hours on the wall, more shots to drill, more rock to clear, more chances for fatigue to make a decision for him. Fatigue is one of the quiet hazards of dangerous work. It does not announce itself like a falling boulder. It enters the hands, the eyes, the judgment. A tired man ties a line less carefully. A tired man misreads a crack. A tired man stands a little too long in the wrong place. A tired man trusts a rock he should not trust. The dam was built by men working inside that pressure. And yet, the work went on with astonishing success. That is the hard thing to balance in telling the story. Hoover Dam was not a failure. It was a triumph. It was one of the greatest engineering projects of its time. It controlled floods, stored water, generated power, and became an icon of American public works. But a triumph can be true and still be costly. The high scalers prove that. They represent both mastery and danger. They show men adapting old skills to a modern project. They show how much human risk remained inside an age of giant machinery. When the dam began to rise, concrete became the main spectacle. Hoover Dam was not poured as one giant mass. It was built in vertical columns of interlocking blocks. Concrete placement in each block was limited so heat from curing could be controlled. Cooling pipes carried chilled water through the concrete. After the blocks cooled and contracted, grout was forced into the spaces between them so the dam could become one solid structure. That process was brilliant. But again, the concrete could only matter because the canyon had been prepared. A dam is not just the wall you see. It is the site it grips, the abutments, the foundation, the diversion tunnels, the spillways, the intake towers, the power plant, the access systems, the workers' city, the roads and rail lines, the transmission line that brought power, and the canyon walls stripped of danger by men on ropes. That is what makes Hoover Dam so useful for understanding old infrastructure. Even when the project is famous for big machines, the decisive work often happens where machines cannot stand. The machine age did not eliminate the human body from construction. It put the body next to bigger forces, bigger lifts, bigger blasts, bigger pours, bigger deadlines, bigger consequences. A man with a jackhammer on a rope was not a primitive leftover. He was essential. The dam needed him because the canyon had shaped itself in ways no blueprint could ignore. The rock had to be read directly. Loose material had to be removed directly. Danger had to be turned into manageable risk by contact. That contact is what the high scaler provided. He touched the problem. He drilled it. He blasted it. He pried it loose. He sent it falling before it could fall on someone else. That is why the job was so respected. The high scaler made other men's work possible. Tunnel crews could work with less rock overhead. Concrete crews could build with more confidence. Engineers could trust the clean walls. Equipment could operate in a canyon less likely to shed stone at random. The high scaler did not build the dam by himself. But without him, the dam site was not ready to be built. There is a temptation to turn men like this into daredevils and leave it there. The stunts, the swinging, the nicknames, the rescues, they make easy stories. But daredevil is too small a word. It suggests the danger was the point. For the high scaler, the danger was the condition. The point was the work. The canyon needed to be scaled. The rock needed to come down. The holes needed to be drilled. The charges needed to be set. The dam needed a place to stand. That is what separates labor from spectacle. Spectacle ends when the crowd looks away. Labor continues until the job is finished. The high scalers did both because the job made spectacle unavoidable. Everybody could see them, but visibility did not make the work less real. It made the risk public. Today, photographs of Hoover Dam high scalers are among the most striking images of the project. Men hang from ropes against vast canyon walls. Some sit calmly with drills. Some look almost casual. Some seem impossibly small against the scale of rock. Those photographs are powerful because they compress the whole story into one visual fact. The dam was enormous. The worker was human-sized, and the human-sized worker still had to begin the job. That is the heart of built before machines. Not nostalgia for danger. Not pretending the old way was better. Not turning suffering into entertainment. But remembering that the built world came through bodies. Hands, backs, lungs, balance, judgment, fear, improvisation, sometimes luck. Hoover Dam changed the Southwest. It helped supply water and power to a region that would grow far beyond what many early planners imagined. It became a tourist destination. It became a symbol of federal ambition during the Great Depression. It became an image of American engineering confidence. But confidence is not concrete. Concrete is the visible result. Confidence is what the public felt when it saw the wall complete. The workers experienced the project differently. They experienced heat, dust, blasting, fatigue, noise, falling rock, deadlines, wages, injury, and the daily calculation of risk. For the high scaler, the calculation was literal. Can this rope hold? Can this rock hold? Can I drill here? Can I swing clear? Can I trust the men above me? Can the crew below trust me? Each question had to be answered while hanging in air. That is why the high scaler remains one of the clearest symbols of Hoover Dam labor. He shows the project at human scale. A dam of 6 million tons begins with one man deciding where to place a drill. A structure visited by millions begins with one worker lowering himself into danger, so a wall of rock will not later fail. The next time someone looks at Hoover Dam from the crest and sees the concrete curve dropping in a black canyon, they should also imagine the canyon before the wall, before the reservoir, before the finished roadways, before the tourist railings, before the power plant became part of the view. Imagine the raw canyon, the Colorado still running below, the walls still shedding rock, the tunnel crews still blasting passages through stone, the cableways still moving loads across the gorge, and on the cliff face, small figures hanging from ropes, drilling in a rock that could kill them or save others depending on when it fell. That is where the dam began. Not only in the plans, not only in Washington offices, not only in the contracts signed by 6 companies. It began on the wall, with the high scalers, with men who made the canyon buildable. The modern world often remembers the machine and forgets the person who made the machine useful. At Hoover Dam, the machines were huge. Cableways carried heavy loads. Trucks dumped fill. Compressors powered drills. Concrete systems worked at industrial scale. But when the problem was a cracked canyon wall above a future dam site, the answer still had to be a man on a rope. That is the old truth inside the modern project. Before everything could be mechanized, workers had to stand, crawl, climb, hang, drill, pry, and judge. The high scalers did all of that in public view, hundreds of feet above the Colorado. Some did it for the pay, some for the pride, some because the Depression left men hungry for any job, even one that looked insane for below. Some because they had the rare nerve and body control the work demanded. Whatever brought them there, they became part of the dam's foundation story, not buried in concrete. That old myth is false. No workers are buried in Hoover Dam, but the work of the dead and living is still inside the project in another way. It is inside the cleared canyon walls, inside the tunnel portals, inside the safer paths made by blasted stone, inside the safety lessons learned from falling objects, inside the hard hats that became common because men needed protection from the sky itself, inside every photograph where a worker on a rope looks impossibly small against the wall he helped prepare. That is how labor stays in a structure, not always as a body, often as an absence. The rock that did not fall later because someone removed it earlier. The tunnel entrance that did not get buried. The crew below that did not get crushed. The dam that could grip canyon walls made ready by hands. That is what the high scalers left behind. They removed danger before most people ever saw the finished dam. And because they succeeded, their work became invisible. That is how infrastructure rewards many workers. If the job is done well, later generations do not notice the problem. They notice the monument. They notice the view. They notice the tourist stop. They notice the reservoir. They notice the concrete. They do not notice the loose rock that is no longer there. They do not notice the man who knocked it down. That is why these stories matter. Because the built world is full of missing danger. Danger removed by someone. Stone cut by someone. Mud cleared by someone. Water diverted by someone. Steel placed by someone. Concrete vibrated by someone. A canyon scaled by someone. Before modern machines. And even alongside the early machines of the 20th century, that someone was often a worker whose name never reached the postcard. The postcard shows Hoover Dam as a completed fact. The real story begins before completion. It begins with men arriving during the Great Depression because work was scarce and the dam was hiring. It begins with heat on the canyon floor. It begins with blasting tunnels so the Colorado could be moved out of the way. It begins with ropes over the rim and drills lowered to men who trusted knots, anchors, and one another. It begins with hard-boiled hats made from coal tar because falling rock did not wait for official safety culture. It begins with Oliver Cowan swinging out to grab a falling engineer. It begins with Louis Fagan turning a rope swing into a commute. It begins with hundreds of ordinary shifts where nobody performed a famous rescue and nobody received a nickname. But the work still had to be done. That is the part worth remembering. The famous stories survive because they are dramatic. The ordinary shifts built the dam. A man lowered himself. He drilled. He blasted. He cleared rock. He climbed back. The next day, he did it again. That repetition made the canyon safer. That safer canyon made the concrete work possible. That concrete work made the dam. And the dam changed the river. If this story made you see Hoover Dam differently, subscribe to Built Before Machines. This channel exists to remember the workers, tools, strange machines, and dangerous methods that built America before modern construction equipment took over. The algorithm remembers the dam. It remembers the numbers. It remembers the big wall and the lake behind it. But it forgets the men on ropes. The men drilling into Black Canyon with 44-pound jackhammers. The men who worked where machines could not stand. Before Hoover Dam could rise from the Colorado, high scalers had to hang above it. And they made the canyon ready, one dangerous piece of rock at a time.